So Allie Sakakini was supposed to tell us this morning about her wonderful trip to Haiti, where she went on a mission trip and worked as a nurse at a orphanage. Her grandfather passed away yesterday. Terry's father passed away yesterday. So Allie wasn't able to be here today. So this week as you pray, please remember the Sakakini family in your prayers. So instead you get me. And my feet, that's right. Thank you, Tim. So my daughter, Caroline, recently turned 2 and been talking now for about a year, but she's starting to say things, more and more words every day. And what's troubling is that she's saying words that I don't remember teaching her. You ever had that problem? And I know my wife didn't teach her those words. But what's most troubling for me is a word that she's learned. I don't know where she learned it, honestly. And she says it now often, and it breaks my heart every time I hear her say it. She'll say, "Daddy" or "Mommy, I'm scared." And I don't know where she's learned that word. I don't know if we say that at all, that we're scared. But she says that she's scared, and how such a young person can have that feeling already and associate that with a word, "I'm scared." And our response is, well, you don't need to be afraid. You don't need to be scared. Mommy and Daddy are here. We're not going to let anything harm you. And as we tuck her in at night, we assure her that she's safe. But if I'm being really honest, I'm kind of scared too. And I can't really say that to her, but that's what I'm feeling inside. I'm kind of scared too. I saw this week a great Norman Rockwell painting from the 1940s where a father and mother were tucking their children in and trying their best to comfort them while the father held in his hand a newspaper with something about Hitler and World War II. And the title of the painting was "Freedom from Fear." This idea that we tuck our children in and sometimes we assure them that it's going to be okay when we really don't know that it's going to be okay. This week's news has brought to light conversations that I wasn't ready for, thoughts that I wasn't ready for, including nuclear war. I'm not ready to have that conversation. I'm not ready to feel that, to think about that. I was caught off guard. And then the protests that have been happening the last 36 hours. I see those protests, and what I'm afraid of is that there will be more, and that they will be closer to home. And I have a friend who lives a mile and a half from downtown Charlottesville, and he's on Facebook saying, I'm okay. I can hear it, but it's not on my street. And I have to be honest, and I know, it's not good for a grown man to admit that he's afraid, but there are times when I'm afraid and I don't know what to say. Our text today, 2 of our texts today, talk about fear. The first is Elijah. Elijah, who in chapter 19 goes and hides in a cave. But in chapter 18, the rest of the story is that Elijah has a showdown with the prophets of Baal, who was a pagan god. And there was this big showdown, and there were two altars built. And Elijah's by himself. And the prophets of Baal, there's just a bunch of them. And they say, okay, whose God can call down fire and consume what's on the altar? And so all the prophets of Baal, they set up their altar and they say, we're going to go first. And so Elijah says, okay, go first. And they spend all day trying to get Baal to come down and to consume the sacrifice that is on the altar. And they cut themselves and they do all these things in loud prayer saying, Baal, come down and take this sacrifice. And Baal doesn't. And the whole day Elijah's just sitting there waiting for his opportunity. And then finally it's Elijah's turn, and he stands up and says, okay, watch this. And he puts some meat to be sacrificed on the altar, and then he says, bring me pitchers of water, and he dumps water all over it. And then he says, okay, God, it's your turn. And then this big fire from heaven comes down and consumes the sacrifice and consumes the altar and consumes every drop of water. In this great moment, God shows up in a mighty way and shows to the community that God is the one and only true God. And Elijah, you would think, is on top of the world, like, see, I told you so. And he should be walking around and strutting. Instead, what does he do? He runs to a cave in fear. He forgets what he just saw. And he runs to a cave in fear. And then Peter's in the boat with the other disciples, and they see Jesus walking on the water. And all the other disciples see Jesus, and they're terrified. But Peter has more courage and more bravery than the rest of the disciples, and he sees Jesus and says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you, and I'll walk on water. So Jesus says, come on, Peter. And he starts walking on water. But he feels the wind. He feels the storm. He finally senses the danger. And in fear, he looks away from Jesus and starts to sink. Fear caused him to look away from Jesus. Fear caused Elijah to run away and not trust in God. And then we have this beautiful response from God. This is how God talks to us in the midst of our fears. God says, what are you doing here, Elijah? After all I've done, after all you've seen, you're still afraid. What are you doing here, Elijah? And Jesus to Peter, why did you doubt? This is immediately after our text from last week where Jesus feeds 5,000. Why did you doubt? What do I have to do for you to believe? Fear is powerful. Fear is powerful. It's powerful and it's dangerous. A wise man once said, okay, Yoda said it, but doesn't make it any less true. Fear leads to anger, and anger leads to hate. Fear leads to anger, and anger leads to hate. And I'm going to add in, and there's no room for hate in the kingdom of God. There is no room for hate in the kingdom of God. Yesterday, I heard Caroline say, Mommy, I'm scared. And I heard Michelle say, what are you afraid of? What are you scared of? And I couldn't hear what Caroline said, but I heard Michelle say, you don't need to be afraid. There's a light in there. There's a light in there. And as I heard her say that, I was reminded of our baptismal liturgy that says, let your light so shine before others so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Light. You might be like me. I want to be the light. But at times, I'm afraid of the darkness. And I don't believe that I can make a difference. At times, my fear is stronger than my faith. And that's very hard for me to admit, but it's true. But the good news is that my fear will never be stronger than God's steadfast love. In fearful times, we can learn from Elijah's mistake. We can trust that God will never abandon us. In fearful times, we can learn from Peter's mistake, and we can keep our eyes on Jesus and his promises. In fearful times, we can trust what the author of today's psalm had to say when he wrote, God will speak peace into the lives of his faithful people. In fearful times, we can be the light the world needs. We can be the light that we were created to be. Today's Romans text says, "How beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news," to which I say, how beautiful are the feet, hands, and faces of those who overcome their fears and shine light into the darkest places. Amen.